Now let's talk about that big trailer that came out. I know it came out a week ago. We could have talked about it in the last week's podcast. We talked about how we saw the trailer, but we wanted to do the mock draft. I thought it was a lot of fun. And by the way, if you guys want to see more of that, I know it didn't get a ton of views and all that sort of stuff, but we had so much fun. So we might be doing villain mock drafts. We might be doing Star Wars, DC mock drafts. Anyways, all that aside, a Dune trailer came out. Now, for those of you who don't know, Dune, which is based on the book by Frank Herbert, one of the all-time sci-fi classics, is getting a movie that's coming out on October 22nd, directed by Denis Villeneuve. And for those of you who haven't seen or who don't know Denis Villeneuve, he has directed films such as Arrival and Blade Runner 2049, both excellent, excellent films. And he is just a top-class talent. He just knows how to direct these kind of just soaring and cinematic type films. So that's something to be excited about. On top of the fact that the source material is so rich, there was a film. I don't remember. I can't quite remember who directed and who acted in the film. There was an adaptation in the 80s or 90s, I believe. It wasn't that great from what I heard. But again, you can always improve upon the older adaptations. And so Warner Brothers decided, or I believe Legendary is the one who's actually producing this movie, decided to give Dune another shot with Denis Villeneuve. And he has assembled, one of the all-time casts for this film. You have Timothée Chalamet, just an amazing actor in today's space, one of the youngest and most amazing actors that's out there, playing Paul Atreides. You have Zendaya, who's a great actress. You have Rebecca Ferguson. You have Oscar Isaac, Josh Brolin, Dave Bautista, Aquaman, not Josh Momoa, Jason Momoa. You have Stellan Skarsgård, David Dastmalchian. Just the list goes on and on and on and on, and it is just incredible to see the kind of production they've put into this film. So, first of all, what did I think about the trailer? I have read the book. For those of you who haven't read the book, it is a very dense read. There is a lot going on in the book. But once you can kind of get past the terminology and all the new characters and the technology, it's a pretty fascinating book, I have to say. And it just does such a good job of world building too. Like, I don't know if it can rival The Lord of the Rings or anything like that, but the way that it world builds is just fantastic. It's crazy. So in this trailer, you see just sprawling landscapes. You see Chani, who's played by Zendaya, and she's talking about the dreams that she, or the landscape of Arrakis, and then dreams that you can see. She's in Paul Atreides' dreams, and he talks about this with Duncan Idaho. You see Duke Leto, you see Gurney Halleck, Lady Jessica, and okay, so I did that for a reason, and the reason is this, because I want to talk about this. If you have no idea what I just said, what any of that means, you are probably in the vast majority of the audience of this film. Because here's the thing. I am coming from the perspective of someone who has read the Dune book and very much enjoyed it. And when I saw the trailer for this, I was giddy. Because it looks like such a faithful yet cinematic adaptation of the book. At the same time, and this is something that studios like Marvel has to balance, for example, trying not to alienate the wider audience, right? Trying not to alienate the vast majority of their audience who hasn't read a comic book about Kang the Conqueror or Kate Bishop. And so, the book deals with things like terms that they haven't spoken about in the trailer, like Muad'Dib and the Bene Gesserit and Kwisatz Haderach, for example. I've probably, by the way, just butchered those terms because, there are very complicated terms in the book. But anyways, the book deals with a lot of those things and titles and prophecies and things like that I actually, based on the trailer, am not entirely sure that the movie is going to delve into. I was talking with someone about this, and what we both agreed on is that the movie, from the trailer at least, seems to be simplifying the book in little ways that is going to make it more accessible to the audience. Now, for those of us who are huge fans of the books, this might be a little bit disappointing, but then I have to take a step back and remember that I am obviously not the target audience necessarily. Like Denis Villeneuve said, he just is so in love with the books, and it's a great book. But he also has to remember to make a film that will be appealing to the mass audiences. So you don't hear any of those terms about Muad'Dib and all that sort of stuff. It's just Paul and Duke Leto. And another thing, again, minor spoilers for the book, but I'm not going to reveal anything that's major, so don't worry. But the book doesn't necessarily focus as much on the relationship between Duke Leto and Paul. Paul's father is Duke Leto, played by Oscar Isaac. But it does look like the trailer is putting much more of an emphasis on Leto's relationship with Paul, which I think is really interesting. And for those of you who don't know, this film is, I believe, only the first half of the Dune book, which is good because if you were to try to adapt the entirety of the Dune book, it would just be insane. It would be absolutely insane. I don't know where this is going to end in terms of the book, but again, I think that it's a smart move on Denis Villeneuve's part to adapt only the first half, if that's still the case. And I hope that's still the case because, again, it's just such a massive book to adapt in one go. But, with the lines at the end of Paul saying, what if I'm not ready? And Duke Leto saying, if you're not, then just know you're my son. I think that really indicates that the soul of this movie is going to be Leto and Paul. And I think that's a really good angle to take, honestly, as a filmmaker and someone, who would adapt Dune onto the big screen. Obviously, the action looks fantastic. You see Dave Bautista as a Raban or Rabin. You see Stellan Skarsgård, wow, as Baron Harkonnen. He looks great as always. I mean, he's fantastic in everything he does. And obviously, Leto's and Chani. I'm getting the actors and the characters confused. Timothée Chalamet, I have to say, I wasn't necessarily super impressed by him in the trailer. I think he delivers all of his dialogue like really wispy, and I don't know. There was something that was a little bit missing from this version of Paul that I didn't quite get that same strength and brashness that I got from the books. But again, I don't want to compare the books to the movies that much. And I think that, again, this movie looks like it is going to be fantastic. My only concern, right? Because I don't think there's any doubt in my mind that this is going to be a great movie and the critics are going to love it. The only doubt in my mind is if people are going to go see it. Pandemic notwithstanding, is this movie going to be the same as Blade Runner 2049, which was an excellent film, but nobody saw it? And I fear that it might be, honestly. I think a lot of the hardcore nerds are going to go out and see this movie because it looks fantastic. But I also think that the vast majority of the audience is looking at this trailer and going, it just looks like sci-fi, honestly. And it was based on a pretty popular book. And that's why they're not including terms like, if they said Bene Gesserit, then people would be so confused, right? It's hard. It's a hard balance of adapting something that is this densely sci-fi, this densely packed with lore, into something that can be palatable for the wider audiences. So I don't envy the task that Denis Villeneuve had. I, as a fan of the book and also just as a fan of sci-fi, think the trailer looks fantastic. I think that this movie is going to just crush it and probably be one of my favorite movies of the year. But it just remains to be seen how well this movie can do at the box office.